Marcus Flynn had exactly 3 rules for surviving as the only human on Galactic Research Station Harmony. Rule 1. Never volunteer for overtime. Rule 2. Avoid the cafeteria's mystery protein on Wednesdays. Rule 3. When you find something that looks like it could eat your face, don't poke it with a stick. Naturally, he was about to break Rule 3. The maintenance tunnel beneath Section C hadn't been cleaned in what Marcus generously estimated to be several geological epochs. His flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating years of accumulated space dust and what he really hoped was just rust staining the walls. The ventilation system down here had been making sounds like a dying whale for weeks, and Captain Zealous had finally gotten tired of the complaints. "Just fix it, Flynn," the reptilian commander had hissed, his forked tongue flicking in annoyance, "and try not to break anything expensive." Marcus had wanted to point out that on a station where a single light bulb cost more than his monthly salary, everything was expensive. But arguing with a 7-foot lizard man, who could bench press a shuttle, wasn't high on his list of career goals. The rhythmic thumping was coming from Junction 7, a cramped intersection where 3 major air ducts converged. Marcus squeezed through the narrow access hatch, muttering under his breath about alien architects who apparently designed ventilation systems for species with no bones. That's when he saw it. Wedged between 2 support beams was something that looked like a cross between an egg and a cocoon, about the size of a basketball. It pulsed with a faint bioluminescent glow, and every few seconds it would thump against the metal beam, the source of their noise problem, apparently. Marcus crouched down, playing his flashlight over the surface. The shell was translucent enough that he could see something moving inside. Something with too many teeth. "Well," he said to the darkness, "this is either going to be really stupid or really, really stupid." He carefully extracted the pod from its makeshift nest and was surprised by how warm it felt. Whatever was inside was definitely alive, and from the increasingly frantic movements, it was probably running out of time. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in Captain Zelos's office, holding the pod like a particularly awkward birthday present. The captain's vertical pupils had narrowed to slits, and his tail was doing that twitchy thing that usually preceded someone getting reassigned to the waste processing deck. "You brought a Vorthak egg onto my station," Zelos said, his voice carrying the kind of deadly calm that made Marcus's survival instincts start screaming. "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds bad," Marcus replied. "But technically I found it on your station. Big difference." Dr. Crean, the station's chief science officer, clicked her mandibles in what Marcus had learned was the insectoid equivalent of nervous laughter. "Marcus, Vortheks are apex predators. They are territorial, aggressive, and have been known to crack open starship hulls with their bare claws. This egg should be jettisoned immediately." "Into space?" Marcus asked. "Into space," she confirmed. "So we're talking about spacing a baby?" "We're talking about preventing a massacre," Captain Zealous interjected. "Vorthaks don't domesticate, Flynn. They don't socialize. They hunt, they kill, and they eat everything else, including humans." Marcus looked down at the pod, which had gone still in his arms. "But it's just a baby. A baby that will grow into something that could tear through this station's hull," Dr. Crean added helpfully. "I'm invoking Article 7 of the Galactic Protection Protocols," Marcus said suddenly. The room went quiet. Captain Zelos's tail stopped twitching. "You can't be serious," the captain said. "Article 7, subsection 12, Marcus continued, pulling up the regulation on his datapad. "Any sentient species has the right to request protective custody of an abandoned offspring of any other species, provided they accept full responsibility for its actions and well-being." Dr. Crean's compound eyes literally bulged. "Marcus, that law was written for civilized species adopting civilized orphans, not for humans adopting galactic nightmares." "The law doesn't specify," Marcus said with a shrug. "It just says any species. Pretty sure Vorthaks qualify." Captain Zelos leaned back in his chair, a sound like grinding stone emanating from his throat. "You realize what you're asking for, Flynn. If that thing so much as scratches another crew member, you'll be held responsible. Court-martial, imprisonment, possibly execution depending on the damage." "I understand. And you still want to keep it." Marcus looked down at the pod again. Through the translucent shell, he could see a small form curled up inside, no longer thrashing. It looked tired. It looked alone. "Yeah," he said. "I do." Captain Zelos was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he keyed his communicator. "All senior staff to conference room B. Priority Alpha." As Marcus headed for the door, still cradling the egg, Dr. Crean called after him. "Marcus? What are you going to call it?" He paused at the doorway. I don't know. Buddy, maybe? The horrified silence that followed him down the corridor was probably not a good sign. Conference Room B was what happened when you asked a committee of different species to design a meeting space. The result was a geometric nightmare of adjustable furniture that somehow managed to be uncomfortable for everyone equally. Marcus sat at one end of the table, still holding the now quiet pod, while the senior staff filed in with expressions ranging from morbid curiosity to barely concealed panic. Communications Officer Pip was the first to speak, her voice hitting frequencies that made Marcus's teeth ache. The diminutive, fur-covered alien looked like someone had crossed a hamster with anxiety itself. Are we really going to let him keep that thing? Because I've read the reports about Vorthax, and they use the word disembowel a lot. Technically, said Professor Quilp, adjusting his spectacles with one of his many tentacles, the human has invoked a legitimate legal precedent. From an anthropological perspective, this presents a fascinating opportunity to study interspecies adoption dynamics. Security Chief Bronx, who looked like someone had carved a person out of granite and forgotten to add a sense of humor, rumbled his disapproval. From a security perspective, this presents a fascinating opportunity to watch everyone die horribly. Captain Zelos raised a clawed hand for silence. The law is clear. Flynn has the right to assume custody. However, he added, fixing Marcus with a stare that could have melted hull plating, he also assumes all liability. The question before us is whether we allow this experiment to proceed or whether we declare it a clear and present danger to station security. Experiment, Marcus repeated. That's what we're calling basic compassion now? What you're calling compassion, Dr. Crean interjected, the rest of the galaxy calls a death wish. Vorthax are not pets, Marcus. They're weapons of biological warfare that happen to reproduce. Have any of you actually met a Vorthak? Marcus asked. The silence was telling. So you're basing your entire argument on reports and secondhand horror stories, Marcus continued. Great. Really scientific approach there, Doc. Professor Quilp's tentacles writhed with what Marcus had learned was intellectual excitement. Actually, this could provide invaluable data on nature versus nurture in apex predator species. If we monitor the situation closely, document every interaction, we might learn something unprecedented about behavioral modification in... We might learn what human intestines look like from the outside, Pip squeaked. I volunteer to take first watch, Bronx said grimly. When it goes bad, I'll put it down before it kills more than half the crew. How optimistic of you, Marcus said dryly. Captain Zelos leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. The human keeps his pet project, but under strict observation. 24-hour monitoring, full sensor coverage, and the first sign of aggressive behavior toward any crew member results in immediate termination. Of the creature or Marcus? Professor Quilp asked with scientific interest. Yes, Zelos replied. Over the next hour they established protocols that would have made a maximum security prison warden proud. Marcus's quarters were to be retrofitted with reinforced walls, emergency containment fields, and enough surveillance equipment to track a fruit fly's breathing patterns. The creature would be monitored, analyzed, and documented from the moment it hatched until the moment it inevitably tried to eat someone's face. One more thing, Captain Zelos added as the meeting broke up. I'm establishing a betting pool. Dr. Crean's mandibles clicked in confusion. Sir? How long before Flynn's pet turns homicidal? Pip, you're taking bets. Standard credits, minimum wager of 50. That's horrible, Marcus protested. I'll take 2 days, Bronx said, placing a credit chip on the table. Pound week, Dr. Crean added reluctantly. 36 hours, Pip squeaked, her fur standing on end. Professor Quilp considered thoughtfully. I'll wager it never turns violent at all. The bonding process might override its predatory instincts entirely. Everyone stared at him. It's a long shot, he admitted, but the payout will be substantial. As the crew filed out, making their various bets and muttering about humans and their inexplicable death wishes, Marcus remained behind, with Captain Zelos. You know this is insane, right? The captain said quietly. Probably, Marcus agreed. But I've never been accused of being particularly sane. If this goes wrong, it won't. If it does, Zelos continued, I won't be able to protect you. The Galactic Council doesn't look kindly on species that harbor biological weapons, even accidentally. Marcus looked down at the pod, which was starting to crack along its seams. Whatever was inside was getting ready to make its grand entrance. Then I guess I better not screw this up, he said. As he headed back to his quarters to prepare for the arrival of his new roommate, Marcus could hear Pip behind him. already taking more bets from passing crew members. The current odds, from what he could gather, were strongly in favor of his untimely and messy demise. "Well, buddy," he said to the pod, "no pressure or anything?" The hatching happened at 300 station time, naturally, because apparently even alien babies had no respect for sleep schedules. Marcus woke to the sound of cracking shells and what could only be described as the galaxy's angriest squeaky toy. He rolled out of bed to find his quarters transformed into something resembling a mad scientist's laboratory. Sensor arrays blinked from every corner, cameras tracked his movement, and a holographic display showed real-time readings of everything from air temperature to his heart rate. Privacy, it seemed, was another casualty of interspecies adoption. The pod sat in the center of it all, split open like a flower made of nightmares, and there, in the middle of the biological wreckage, was the ugliest thing Marcus had ever seen. "Well, hello there, beautiful," he said. The creature was about the size of a house cat, if house cats were covered in midnight black scales and had 6 legs ending in razor-sharp claws. Its head was disproportionately large, dominated by luminescent yellow eyes and a mouth that revealed far too many teeth for something so small. Bony spikes ran along its spine, and its tail ended in what looked like a natural sledgehammer. It was, objectively speaking, absolutely terrifying. It was also shivering. Marcus approached slowly, hands visible and empty. "Hey there, buddy. Welcome to the universe. Sorry about the surveillance state thing, but apparently your species has a reputation." The creature's head snapped toward him, those alien eyes focusing with predatory intensity. For a moment, Marcus wondered if he was about to become the shortest-lived adoptive parent in galactic history. Then Buddy made a sound that was somewhere between a chirp and a growl, and Marcus's heart melted completely. "Oh, you're hungry, aren't you?" Marcus said, settling cross-legged on the floor a safe distance away. "Yeah, hatching's probably exhausting work." Over the next few hours, Marcus learned several important things about Vorthak childcare. First, they were indeed carnivorous, but fortunately accepted the synthesized protein paste from the emergency rations. Second, they were surprisingly intelligent, watching Marcus's every movement with obvious curiosity. Third, they had absolutely no understanding of human sleep cycles, and apparently considered 400 the perfect time for exploratory play. The monitoring station in the observation room was in full swing. Professor Quilp had claimed the primary console, his tentacles dancing across multiple keyboards as he recorded every interaction. Dr. Crean hovered nearby, her compound eyes reflecting the glow of dozens of displays showing biometric data, behavioral analysis, and threat assessment algorithms. "Fascinating," Quilp murmured, adjusting his spectacles. "The creature shows none of the aggressive territoriality described in previous encounters. Its posture is curious rather than defensive." "Give it time," Bronx rumbled from his position by the emergency containment controls. "Predators study their prey before they strike." "It's been 6 hours, Pip pointed out, her fur bristling with nervous energy. "Shouldn't it have tried to eat him by now?" On the monitors, they watched Marcus attempt to teach Buddy not to use the furniture as a scratching post. The creature seemed to understand the concept of no, which was already more than most of the crew had expected. "Look at this," Dr. Crean said, highlighting a section of the biodata. "The creature's stress hormones are at baseline levels. In previous studies of Vorthak behavior, stress indicators were elevated consistently during any interaction with other species." "Maybe it hasn't realized he's a different species yet," Pitt suggested hopefully. "Vorthaks can detect species differences through scent markers," Professor Quilp replied absently, still recording data. "No, this is something else entirely." Day 2 brought new developments. Buddy had figured out how to open the food dispenser, demonstrated an alarming ability to climb walls, and had somehow learned to respond to his name. When Marcus called, "Buddy, come here," the little creature would bound over with something that looked disturbingly like joy. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Crean admitted, reviewing the overnight footage. "Vorthaks don't exhibit pack-bonding behavior. They're solitary hunters from birth." "Maybe they're solitary because no one ever tried not being terrified of them," Marcus suggested through the comm system. "That's the most ridiculously anthropomorphic thing I've ever heard," she replied. "And yet your little monster isn't trying to murder me, so maybe ridiculous anthropomorphism is onto something." By day 4, Buddy had doubled in size and learned what Marcus generously called house rules. No clawing the walls, no eating the furniture, no practicing hunting techniques on the surveillance equipment. The creature seemed to understand these weren't suggestions, and more importantly, seemed to want to follow them. The bonding appears to be mutual, Professor Quilp observed during the daily briefing. The human shows decreased stress indicators when the creature is present, and the creature exhibits separation anxiety when the human leaves for extended periods. Separation anxiety, Captain Zelos repeated flatly. It whines, Pitt translated, like a lost puppy. A lost puppy with 6 legs and enough teeth to open a can opener factory. The betting pool has gotten interesting, Bronx noted. Half the engineering crew is now betting the creature never turns violent, the other half is betting it does but protects Flynn from external threats. What are you betting? Marcus asked through the comm. I think I'm going to need a lot more alcohol to get through this assignment, Bronx replied. The real test came on day 6, when Maintenance Chief Torvin, a belligerent Gornaxian with all the personality of a malfunctioning waste processor, decided to pay Marcus a visit. Torvin had been opposed to the pet project from the beginning, and his idea of a friendly check-in involved a lot of aggressive posturing and implied threats. But he took one look at the hostile visitor, placed himself between Torvin and Marcus, and issued a warning growl that made the lights flicker. "Thing just threatened me," Torvin snarled, his rocky hide shifting to a more aggressive color pattern. "That thing is protecting me," Marcus replied calmly. "There's a difference." The standoff lasted exactly 30 seconds before Torvin decided that discretion was the better part of not being disemboweled by a juvenile Vorthak. After he left, Buddy settled down next to Marcus's chair and made that chirping purr sound that meant he was content. "Did you see that?" Marcus asked the monitoring room. He knew Torvin was being hostile. "He didn't attack, didn't escalate, just made it clear that I was under his protection." The observation room was quiet for a long moment. "The creature is exhibiting protective bonding behavior," Professor Quilp said finally. "This is completely outside documented Vorthok behavioral patterns." "Maybe," Dr. Crean said slowly, "documented Vortek behavioral patterns are wrong." "Or maybe," Marcus said, scratching Buddy behind what passed for ears, "nobody ever bothered to find out what they're really like when they're not scared and alone." Buddy purred and settled closer to his human, 6 legs tucked neatly beneath him, looking for all the world like the galaxy's most dangerous house cat. 2 weeks into the great Vorthek experiment, Buddy had grown from house cat size to something approaching a small pony. His scales had darkened to an almost mirror-like black, his spikes had sharpened into genuine weapons, and his jaw could now crack metal with casual ease. When he yawned, which he did frequently after meals, crew members 3 decks away could hear his teeth clicking together. The surveillance footage from Marcus's quarters had become the station's most popular entertainment. During off-duty hours, crew members would gather in the recreation areas to watch the daily highlights. Buddy learning to open doors, Buddy figuring out how to operate the sonic shower, Buddy discovering that Marcus's spare boots made excellent chew toys. "It's like watching a nature documentary," Pip observed, her voice pitched high with nervous excitement. "Except the apex predator keeps doing adorable things." "Adorable," Security Chief Bronx repeated in the tone of someone who had seen too much violence to find anything truly adorable. "That thing could bite through hull plating." "But look," Dr. Crean said, pointing to the main display. "When Marcus tells him not to chew the furniture, he stops. When Marcus says it's time for sleep, he curls up in his designated corner. This level of behavioral compliance is unprecedented." On screen, Marcus was attempting to teach Buddy the concept of fetch. The game involved Marcus throwing a metal sphere across the room and Buddy retrieving it. What made it interesting was that Buddy had figured out the rules in about 30 seconds and was now deliberately varying his approach to keep the game challenging for Marcus. "The creature is adapting its behavior to maintain the human's engagement," Professor Quilp noted, his tentacles writhing with scientific excitement. "It's demonstrating not just intelligence, but emotional intelligence. Or it's a very patient predator that's waiting for the right moment to strike," suggested Chief Medical Officer Vex, a pessimist even by Saturnian standards. "Vex, it's been 2 weeks," Dr. Crean pointed out. "If it wanted to hurt Marcus, it would have done so by now." "Maybe it's waiting until it's big enough to eat the rest of us too," Vex replied darkly. The debate was interrupted by an alert from the main sensor array. Captain Zealous' voice crackled through the comm system. "All senior staff to the bridge, we have incoming traffic." The approaching vessel was a Galactic Authority inspection cruiser, the kind of ship that showed up when someone had filed a complaint about dangerous biological specimens being harbored on civilian stations. Captain Zealous stood at the center of the bridge, his reptilian features arranged in an expression of barely controlled panic. "Someone reported us," he announced without preamble. Galactic Authority received an anonymous tip about illegal possession of a Class A biological weapon. Torvin, Marcus said immediately through the comm from his quarters. Has to be. He's been complaining about Buddy to anyone who'll listen. The inspector will be here in 6 hours, Zealous continued. If they find that creature, they'll destroy it immediately and arrest everyone involved. Marcus, you need to get rid of it. Absolutely not. The bridge fell silent. Even the normally chattering Pip went quiet. Marcus, Dr. Crean said carefully, this isn't a request. The Galactic Authority doesn't negotiate when it comes to biological weapons. They'll space buddy and court-martial you for harboring a dangerous organism. Then we don't let them find him. How exactly do you propose hiding a rapidly growing Vorthak on a space station? Captain Zelos asked. I don't know, Marcus admitted, but I'm not giving up on him. He's not a weapon, he's not a monster, he's just Buddy. The conversation was interrupted by a soft chiming from the internal sensors. Buddy had activated the door controls to Marcus's quarters and was now padding down the corridor toward the bridge. The creature had grown large enough that his footsteps registered on the deck sensors, each impact accompanied by the soft click of claws on metal. Oh, this is bad, Pip squeaked, her fur standing completely on end. He's coming to the bridge. He's never been to the bridge. Maybe he sensed the tension, Professor Quilp suggested. Vorthaks are supposed to be highly sensitive to emotional states. Or maybe he smells fear and it's triggered his hunting instincts, Bronx countered, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. The bridge doors slid open, and Buddy padded inside. He had reached the size where his presence filled the room, his scaled bulk moving with predatory grace. His luminescent eyes swept the assembled crew, taking in their various states of barely controlled panic. Then he walked directly to Marcus and sat down beside him, making that low purring sound that indicated contentment. See? Marcus said, reaching out to scratch behind Buddy's audio receptors. He just wanted to make sure I was okay. Marcus, Captain Zalo said very carefully, that thing is now large enough to kill everyone on this bridge in about 15 seconds. But he won't, Marcus replied confidently. Will you, Buddy? Buddy made a soft chuffing sound that might have been agreement, or might have been him clearing his throat before devouring everyone present. This is insane, Dr. Crean muttered. We're standing on a bridge with a fully grown Vortak, having a casual conversation like it's a house pet. He's not fully grown, Marcus corrected. According to the biological data, he's got at least another 50% growth ahead of him. The horrified silence that followed this announcement was broken by another alert from the sensor array. Inspector's ship just dropped out of hyperspace, Communications Officer Pip reported, her voice cracking with stress. They're requesting permission to dock. Captain Zealots looked from Marcus to Buddy to the approaching inspection vessel on the main screen. His tail was doing that nervous twitching again, but faster now, like a metronome set to panic tempo. 6 hours just became 30 minutes, he announced. Marcus, for the last time, what do you want to do about your pet? Marcus looked down at Buddy, who was now large enough that his head came up to Marcus's chest when the creature was sitting. Those alien eyes looked back at him with something that could only be described as trust. We protect him, Marcus said simply. How? Dr. Crean demanded. How do you protect something that big from a full Galactic Authority inspection? I don't know, Marcus admitted, but we figure it out together. Buddy seemed to sense the tension in the room. He rose to his feet, his impressive bulk now dominating the bridge, and looked around at the assembled crew. His gaze lingered on each of them in turn, as if he was taking their measure. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He lay down, making himself as small and non-threatening as possible, and looked up at Captain Zelos with what could only be described as an expression of polite inquiry. Is he? Captain Zelos started. I think he's asking for help, Marcus said quietly. I think he knows he's in danger, and he's asking you to protect him. The bridge was dead quiet except for the soft hum of life support systems and the distant rumble of the approaching inspection vessel. Well, Captain Zealous said finally, his voice carrying a tone of resignation mixed with determination, I guess we're about to find out just how creative we can get with station regulations. Inspector Gavak was exactly what you'd expect from someone whose job involved destroying things first and asking questions later. The Regelian stood nearly 8 feet tall, with crystalline skin that reflected light in sharp, uncomfortable angles and eyes like chips of frozen starlight. His uniform was so perfectly pressed it could have been used as a cutting instrument, and his voice carried the kind of authority that made seasoned starship captains suddenly remember urgent business elsewhere. Captain Zelos, Kavak announced as he stepped onto the station, his entourage of armed enforcers flanking him like metallic shadows. "I trust you understand why I'm here." "Routine inspection," Zealous replied with the kind of casual confidence that suggested he definitely hadn't spent the last 20 minutes frantically reviewing emergency protocols. "Always happy to cooperate with Galactic Authority." "Routine," Gavok repeated, the word crystallizing in the air like ice. "Yes, I'm sure the Class A biological weapon you're harboring is also routine." In Maintenance Bay 7, the hastily assembled crisis team was putting the finishing touches on what Professor Quilp had optimistically called Operation Invisible Monster. The plan was simple in concept and terrifying in execution. Hide a 6-foot-tall apex predator in plain sight. "This is the stupidest plan in the history of stupid plans," Pip muttered, her fur standing on end as she calibrated the holographic projectors. "We're trying to convince a Galactic Authority inspector that a Vorthak is a maintenance robot." "Not just any maintenance robot," Dr. Crean corrected, making final adjustments to the artificial intelligence interface that would supposedly control their robot. "A prototype heavy-duty repair unit, experimental design, limited behavioral protocols, still in testing phase." "And if he wants to examine the internal components?" Bronx asked grimly. "Then we're all going to prison," Marcus replied cheerfully, putting the finishing touches on Buddy's disguise. The costume consisted of strategic holographic projectors that would overlay mechanical components onto Buddy's organic form, turning claws into manipulator arms and scales into armor plating. But hey, at least we'll have tried. Buddy sat patiently through the preparations, his luminescent eyes tracking every movement with intelligent interest. He seemed to understand that something important was happening, though Marcus doubted he fully grasped the concept of galactic law enforcement. "The key is behavioral consistency," Professor Quilp explained, his tentacles dancing over multiple control interfaces. "Buddy needs to move like a machine, not like a living creature. Rigid movements, mechanical responses, no emotional reactions." "You want him to pretend to be a robot," Marcus said. "I want him to be a robot for the next hour at least." Marcus knelt down in front of Buddy, meeting those alien eyes directly. "Okay, big guy, this is gonna sound weird, but I need you to be very, very boring. Can you do that for me?" Buddy tilted his head in what had become his signature expression of curiosity. "No purring, no playing, no showing off how smart you are. Just stand still and try to look mechanical." The first test came sooner than expected. Inspector Gavok's tour had accelerated ahead of schedule, and suddenly the maintenance bay doors were cycling open. The inspector swept in like a force of nature, his crystalline features reflecting the harsh work lights in jagged patterns. "And this is Maintenance Bay 7, Captain Zealous announced with practiced casualness. "We use it for testing experimental equipment." Gavok's frozen starlight eyes immediately locked onto Buddy, who was standing motionless beside a bank of genuine repair equipment. The holographic overlay was working perfectly, making him appear to be an imposing but clearly mechanical construction. "Interesting design," Gavok said, approaching for a closer examination. "I'm not familiar with this configuration." "Prototype heavy-duty repair unit," Dr. Crean explained, consulting her datapad, "with scientific authority. We're testing adaptive manipulation algorithms for complex maintenance tasks." The cock walked slowly around Buddy, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. Marcus held his breath, acutely aware that one wrong move, one sign of life, would doom them all. "Activate it," Gavok commanded suddenly. "Sir?" Captain Zealous asked. "I want to see it function. Activate the unit." Professor Quilp's tentacles flew over the control interface, sending carefully programmed signals to Buddy through the hidden communicator Marcus had placed behind his audio receptors. The signals were simple: move forward, stop, turn left, manipulate object. Buddy responded perfectly, his movements taking on the characteristic stiffness of automated machinery. He approached a damaged panel, extended his claws in precise mechanical motions, and began what appeared to be diagnostic procedures. "Impressive," Gavok admitted. "The movement algorithms are remarkably sophisticated." "Thank you, sir," Dr. Crean replied. "We're quite proud of the adaptive responses." That's when the real emergency began. The station's proximity alarms started blaring, their harsh tones echoing through the corridors. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red, and Captain Zealous's voice crackled through the comm system. "All hands, emergency stations. We have a massive hull breach in Section C. Repeat, hull breach in Section C." "What's the situation?" Gavok demanded, his inspector's demeanor immediately shifting to crisis management mode. "Debris impact," Zealous replied through the communicator. Large asteroid fragment probably knocked loose by a passing freighter. We've got atmosphere bleeding into space and 3 crew members trapped in the affected section. The inspector's crystalline features arranged themselves into an expression of grim efficiency. How long until you can mount a rescue? That's the problem, Zelos admitted. The breach is too large for standard repair protocols. We'd need heavy machinery to reach the trapped crew, but the route to Section C passes through areas that are now exposed to vacuum. Gavak looked thoughtfully at Buddy, who was still standing motionless beside the repair equipment. This prototype of yours, is it rated for vacuum operations? The crisis team exchanged glances. This was definitely not part of the plan. Well, Dr. Crean said slowly, the design specifications include environmental protection systems, but nothing, Gavak interrupted. You have crew members in danger and equipment that might save them. Deploy it immediately. Inspector, Marcus said carefully, the unit is still in testing phase. Its behavioral protocols might not be reliable in a crisis situation. Then we'll find out, won't we? Gavak replied with the kind of authority that didn't allow for argument. Captain Zelos, clear a path to Section C. I want to see this prototype in action. Marcus looked at Buddy, who was still maintaining his mechanical facade despite the chaos erupting around them. The creature's luminescent eyes met his, and Marcus saw something there that looked remarkably like understanding. Buddy, Marcus said quietly, knowing that Gavak would interpret it as addressing the robot's control system. There are people in trouble. Can you help them? Buddy's head turned toward the corridor leading to Section C, his enhanced senses no doubt already analyzing the situation. For a moment, the mechanical disguise slipped and Marcus saw the intelligent predator evaluating the threat, calculating risks, making decisions. Then Buddy moved, his powerful legs carrying him toward the emergency with fluid grace that no machine could replicate. The holographic disguise flickered and failed under the stress of rapid movement, revealing scales instead of armor plating, organic muscle instead of mechanical actuators. What the hell? Inspector Gavak started. Vey, Marcus said, watching his friend disappear into the dangerous corridor, is not a robot. Behind them, the proximity alarms continued to wail, atmosphere continued to leak into space, and 3 crew members remained trapped in a section of the station that was rapidly becoming uninhabitable. And somewhere in the chaos, a Vorthak who had learned to trust was about to prove that sometimes the most dangerous predator in the galaxy was exactly what you needed to save lives. The next 23 minutes redefined Inspector Gavak's understanding of biological impossibilities. Through the station's internal sensors, they watched Buddy navigate the twisted wreckage of Section C with impossible grace. His 6 legs found purchase on surfaces that would have challenged a mountain climber. His enhanced vision cut through the darkness and debris, and his powerful claws carved through twisted metal like it was decorative paper. The structural damage is extensive, Dr. Crean reported, her voice tight with professional concern as she monitored the situation from the emergency command center. Hull breach extends 40 meters along the outer wall. Atmospheric pressure in that section is dropping rapidly. Where are the trapped crew members? Gavak demanded, his crystalline features reflecting the emergency lighting in sharp red angles. Engineering Alcove 12, Captain Zelos replied. Torvin, Chief Maintenance Specialist Horex, and Junior Technician Q. They were performing routine repairs when the impact occurred. Emergency bulkheads sealed them in, but the life support conduits were severed. On the main display, they could see Buddy moving through the wreckage with predatory efficiency. But this wasn't the random destruction of a rampaging beast. Every movement was calculated, purposeful. He was problem-solving in real time, finding the optimal path through a 3-dimensional maze of twisted metal and exposed power conduits. How long before the trapped crew runs out of breathable atmosphere? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. 17 minutes, Dr. Crean replied grimly. Maybe less if they panic and increase their oxygen consumption. And how long would it take our standard rescue equipment to reach them? 43 minutes, assuming we could clear the debris field without destabilizing the remaining structure. Inspector Gavak watched the display in tense silence. The creature that should have been destroyed on sight was now their only hope of preventing a tragedy. His professional training warred with the evidence of his own eyes as Buddy reached the first major obstacle, a collapsed support beam that blocked the most direct route to the trapped crew. The creature appears to be analyzing the structural integrity, Professor Quilp observed, his tentacles writhing with scientific excitement despite the crisis. Look at how it's testing different contact points, evaluating load distribution. Buddy circled the obstacle twice, his luminescent eyes scanning for weaknesses. Then, with surgical precision, he began cutting through the beam at specific stress points. Each cut was calculated to redistribute the weight safely, preventing further collapse while opening a path forward. That level of structural engineering knowledge, Dr. Crean whispered, that's not instinct, that's learned behavior. He's been watching our repair crews, Marcus realized. All those maintenance operations he observed through the surveillance system. He wasn't just being curious, he was learning. The comm system crackled to life with a panicked transmission from the trapped crew. Torvin's gravelly voice, stripped of its usual arrogance, filled the command center. Emergency command, this is Torvin. Our atmosphere readings are critical. We've got maybe 10 minutes of breathable air left and something's cutting through the hole near our position. Torvin, this is Captain Zelos. Remain calm. Help is on the way. What kind of help? Because it sounds like something with very large claws and I'd rather suffocate than be eaten alive. Marcus activated his communicator. Buddy, can you hear me? The cutting sound stopped. Through the sensors, they could see Buddy's head turned toward the hidden speaker, those alien eyes focusing, with intelligent attention. There are 3 people trapped ahead of you. They're scared, and they don't understand that you're there to help them. You need to be very gentle, okay? Show them you're not going to hurt them. Buddy made a soft chuffing sound that the sensors barely picked up. Then he resumed his work, but slower now, more carefully. Each cut was accompanied by what could only be described as reassuring vocalizations, low rumbles that somehow conveyed peaceful intent. Is it trying to calm them down? Pip asked in amazement. Vorthax don't have vocal communication beyond basic threat displays, Dr. Crean said, but her voice lacked conviction. What we're seeing shouldn't be possible. The breakthrough came at minute 14. Buddy's final cut opened a passage large enough for the trapped crew to escape, but the debris field remained unstable. One wrong move could bring the entire section down on top of them. That's when Buddy did something that left even Inspector Govik speechless. The creature positioned himself beneath the most dangerous section of hanging debris, bracing the unstable structure with his own body. His powerful legs locked into position, his scaled back taking the weight of twisted metal that would have crushed any other rescue worker. He's using himself as a living support beam, Professor Quilp breathed. The stress on his skeletal structure must be enormous. Through the comm system, they could hear Torvin's shocked voice. By the 7 moons of Gornax, it's holding up the ceiling? Torvin, listen carefully, Marcus said through the communicator. His name is Buddy, and he's there to help you. Move slowly, stay calm, and he'll get you out safely. You want me to trust a Vorthek? I want you to trust me, Marcus replied, and I trust him. What followed was the most surreal rescue operation in station history. One by one, the trapped crew members crawled through the gap that Buddy had created, passing within inches of claws that could have shredded them instantly. Herex went first, his natural Caledonian agility making him the obvious choice. Kuel followed, her small stature allowing her to navigate the tight space quickly. Torvin went last, and his passage was the most dangerous. The Gornaxian's bulk required Buddy to adjust his position, redistributing the weight load while maintaining structural integrity. For a terrifying moment, the debris field groaned and shifted, threatening total collapse. Buddy held firm, his entire body trembling with the effort of supporting tons of twisted metal, while a crew member who had wanted him destroyed crawled to safety beneath his protective stance. Clear, Torvin's voice crackled through the comm. We're all clear. Only then did Buddy carefully extricate himself from the debris field, moving with the same calculated precision he had shown throughout the rescue. The structure groaned and settled, but held long enough for Buddy to reach safety. The command center erupted in relieved chatter, but Inspector Govik remained silent, his crystalline features reflecting the display screens as he watched Buddy make his way back through the wreckage toward the main station. Inspector, Captain Zelos said carefully, about the biological weapon classification? Govik raised a hand for silence. They waited as Buddy emerged from the damaged section, his scales dulled with metal dust and his movements showing the exhaustion of his ordeal. The creature looked around at the assembled crew, his luminescent eyes taking in their expressions of amazement and gratitude. Then Buddy did something that no Galactic Authority report had ever documented. He spoke. Not the growls and roars that previous encounters had recorded, but actual words in perfectly clear galactic standard. Father safe? The command center went absolutely silent. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed to pause in shock. Marcus stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion he hadn't expected to feel. Yeah, Buddy. Father's safe. You did good. Buddy's massive head lowered in what could only be interpreted as relief. Crew safe? Everyone's safe, Marcus confirmed. You saved them all. Inspector Gavok finally spoke, his authoritative voice reduced to something approaching wonder. In 47 years of Galactic Authority service, I have never seen a Class A biological weapon risk its own life to save members of another species. That's because, Marcus said quietly, reaching out to scratch behind Buddy's audio receptors. He was never a weapon. He was just waiting for someone to give him a chance to be something else. Gavok approached slowly, his crystalline features arranged in an expression of scientific curiosity rather than enforcement authority. Creature, Buddy, can you understand me? Buddy's luminescent eyes focused on the inspector. Understand, he confirmed, his voice carrying a rumbling undertone that spoke of intelligence far beyond simple mimicry. Why did you save them? They are not your species. By all biological imperatives, you should have seen them as prey or competitors. Buddy considered the question with obvious thoughtfulness. When he answered, his words carried a simplicity that made them profound. Father taught me. Pack protects pack. Inspector Gavok was quiet for a long moment, his frozen starlight eyes moving between Buddy and Marcus. Finally, he activated his official recorder. Inspector's log, Galactic Authority Investigation 77 Alpha. Upon investigation of reported biological weapon harboring, I have discovered not a weapon, but the first documented case of successful interspecies adoption and behavioral modification in a Class A predator species. He paused, looking directly at Buddy. Classification change recommended. Vortax specimen designated Buddy to be reclassified as sentient companion, with full rights and protections under galactic adoption protocols. The command center exploded in cheers, but Marcus only had eyes for Buddy, who was looking at him with an expression of contentment that transcended species barriers. So, Marcus said, grinning despite himself, looks like you're officially part of the family now. Buddy's response was interrupted by another proximity alert from the sensor array. Captain Zelos checked the displays and groaned. What now? Marcus asked. 3 more ships on approach, Zelos announced, all carrying what appear to be abandoned biological specimens. Marcus looked at Buddy, who somehow managed to convey the impression of an innocent shrug. Well, Marcus said with resignation, looks like I'm starting a daycare center. Inspector Gavok actually smiled, his crystalline features catching the light in what might have been the first genuinely amused expression of his career. I'll need to file a report about this as well. The Galactic Authority is going to have some very interesting policy adjustments to make. As the crew dispersed to handle the new arrivals, Marcus remained with Buddy in the command center. The creature had curled up in a corner, his massive bulk somehow managing to look both powerful and peaceful. You know what the best part is? Marcus said to his friend. You called me father. Buddy's luminescent eyes opened, focusing on Marcus with unmistakable affection. Father, he confirmed simply. And in that moment, Marcus realized that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy wasn't a predator, or a weapon, or a biological nightmare. Sometimes it was just love, waiting for someone brave enough to recognize it.